So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this financial wellbeing webinar, Tenants' Rights, where I'll be aiming to give you the information you need to make sure renting doesn't cause you headaches or any additional financial stress. So I'll just quickly introduce myself. My name's Nadine Reynolds, as Sarah said, and I work for Better With Money, and this is Cushion Specialist Education Company. Better With Money's mission is to help as many people as we can to understand their personal finances, to reduce money stress, and we do this by providing webinars through the workplace. Just have to inform you today, just a little bit of housekeeping. Please ask questions at any point throughout the webinar. And also, if you have any useful information or tips that might help others, please type them in there too. Just to let you know that Better With Money is not connected to any other organisation. We are totally independent and we have no products to sell. So if I do mention companies or products along the way, it's because we genuinely believe they offer good services which you can take advantage of, and not because we have any incentive to do so. So let's get started with today's session and what we're going to be covering. So we'll start with some facts and figures looking at the average rents across the country. Then we'll look at the different ways to rent a property, and very important questions you should be asking and considerations you should have when thinking about which property is for you. As we go through, we'll be looking at what should be in the agreement between you and your landlord and the fees that they're allowed to charge. And then we'll finish off by looking at insurance and what to do when you move out of the property. So let's start with some facts and figures. So according to the English Housing Survey, just over 1/3 of households in England rent their home. So that's about 36%. Another third owns their home outright, and then just under a third owns their home with a mortgage. And of those renting, 50% are privately renting, and about 50% are social renters. So that's local authority and social housing. The predictions are, with the interest rates going up and many people unable to secure affordable mortgages in order to buy a home, demand for rental houses is expected to remain strong. And this is confirmed by looking at how long, on average, a rental property remains empty, which has remained consistently below 30 days across the country since November 2020. So if you look on the left-hand side of the slide, you'll see a chart from a website called Spare Room, which shows the average rents by region in the UK, ranging from £430 a month in Northern Ireland to around £952 per month in London. And please note that it is average. It's not exactly how much it is. I do know it's a lot more expensive in the south. So that is a big outlay each month. So how can you make sure that you're getting the right property that suits you? So let's find that out. Firstly, there are two ways you can privately rent a property. The first is direct with the landlord, and the second is through a letting agent. So let's have a look at both. If you're going directly to the landlord, look for landlords who belong to an accreditation scheme. Accreditation schemes provide training and support to landlords in fulfilling their legal and ethical responsibilities. They are more likely to be responsible landlords with fewer potential issues. Your local council can advise you about accreditation schemes operating in your area and the National Residents Landlords Association and the Guild of Residential Landlords run national schemes as well. All letting agents must be members of a redress scheme in case you have unresolved disputes. And if they receive money from you, such as rent payments, you should check that they are a member of a client money protection scheme. This means that your deposit is held by a separate company whilst you're in the property. There are currently 3 scheme providers. They are Deposit Protection Service, the DPS, My Deposits, and the Tenancy Deposit Scheme. There are very few occasions when a landlord doesn't have to be part of the tenancy deposit scheme. And those cases are if the rent is more than £100,000 a year, the property is a holiday let, and the tenant is a company rather than an individual, or if the company is owned by university or college and rented to it by its students. Reputable letting agents are often accredited through professional bodies such as the Guild of Property Professionals or the UK Association of Letting Agents. There's quite a few names I've popped out there. Like I said, there is a recording of this session, so if you need to refer back to any of this information, you are able to do so. The latest figures I saw recently suggested that about 87% of landlords use letting agents to advertise their properties. So the likelihood is you'll be dealing with one of these firms when you're finding your home. And choosing a home to rent can be a big decision to make. There's a lot to think about to make sure you're getting the right choices before you sign on the dotted line and have to abide by the rules of the tenancy agreement. A tenancy agreement is a legal requirement and is the binding contract between you and your landlord and outlines the legal terms and conditions of your tenancy and what type of tenancy it is. So it's essential before you rent a property to read that agreement in full and understand the conditions. And whilst you're viewing properties, it's a good idea to ask lots of questions so you get a good idea of what the terms and conditions will be in that agreement. So let's have a look at some of the things to consider and the right question to ask, which could save you lots of hassle in the future. So what can you actually afford and what are the possible extra costs? Make sure before you start your viewings that you know how much you can afford to spend per calendar month. Typically, whatever your take-home pay is, a rough rule of thumb is to spend around 35% on rent, 15% on bills, so that rent and bills equal 50%, and 30% on your nice-to-haves that are going out, clothes, just the nice thing to do in life, and 20% of income to save towards financial goals, whether it's savings or paying off debt. So work out your finances first and also consider which area you would like to live in. The larger the area you're prepared to look in, the better chance of finding the right home for you. Once you know these things, it makes your search much easier. And also bear in mind that you are likely to need to pay a refundable deposit on the property and 1 month's rent in advance. So get prepared if this is something you'll need to save for. Since the 1st of June 2019, there has been a cap on the deposit that a tenant is required to pay. So if the total annual rent is less than £50,000, the maximum deposit is 5 weeks' rent. If the annual rent is above that £50,000, the maximum deposit is 6 weeks' rent. The tenancy agreement will set out the situations in which a deposit can be partly or fully withheld. For example, to repair damage caused by you or guests during the tenancy. And once you know the monthly rent you can afford, the likely deposit, you can then turn to things like the lease. Most leases have a time limit on them to protect the landlord and the tenant. This might be a short-term one, like 6 months, or a number of years, or it might be open-ended with a minimum notice period for both parties. If you're looking for a short-term solution, you don't want to get locked into a long-term lease. If you want somewhere more permanent, you don't want to be moving again in a few months. So make sure you ask how long the lease is for before you sign it. Alternatively, you may be offered a weekly or a monthly short hold tenancy, which does not last for a fixed period of time. Even with those tenancies, the landlord must allow you to stay for a minimum of 6 months. So also ask what time of month the rent is due and how your landlord would prefer to receive rental payments. The next thing to do is ask about a notice period. The tenancy agreement should make clear how much notice you need to give if you want to bring your tenancy to a close. 1 month in writing is usually typical, but remember, unless your landlord agrees to end the tenancy early or there's a break in the clause in your tenancy agreement, you'll be obliged to pay rent for the whole of your fixed term. Another thing to consider is whether bills are included in the monthly rent or will you need to pay them separately. And if they're on top, what have they typically been, so you can budget. This varies from tenancy to tenancy and is again an individual decision for each landlord. If bills are not included in the rent, the bills you'll be responsible for will be stated in the agreement. This will typically include utilities, water, gas, electric, and bills for TV and broadband. Also, tenants are obliged to pay council tax unless they are students who are exempt. This is usually the most expensive bills, so check what band the property is. A is the cheapest and G is the most expensive, and this will vary by area too. If it is you who's paying the bills, and you don't necessarily have to stick with your landlord's choice of energy or gas supplier, and you can shop around to get the best deal. So using a comparison tool, on Money Saving Expert or on Compare the Market or any of those energy places, that'll look at the whole of the market so it can help you save money. So as you're looking around the property, also think about security, look at the condition of the property. Do windows and doors open easily, close securely? Are there adequate locks on the doors? Do you have adequate escape routes in case of fire? Are the gutters okay, or any pipes leaking? Are the walls or window frames cracked? And is there a garden or outdoor area you need to maintain? So when you're walking through the property, check these things out, actually physically try these different, taps and door frames and opening locks. And talking about the taps, do they work for both hot and cold water? Is the water pressure high enough? Do the light switches work? Sometimes we just walk around the properties and we don't actually try these out. Also confirm which white goods come with the property, including fridge, washing machine, dishwasher, because in some kitchens they are actually integrated. But also make sure the appliances are clean and in good working order, and ask if the landlord will replace them if not. It's really important to check that you are happy with them, as it's unlikely that you'll be able to get them changed once you've moved in. Just double check if there's any sign of pests, including mouse droppings, cracks or holes in the walls, and when was the property last treated for pests? Are there any signs of mould, particularly damp in areas such as the kitchen or bathroom? Letting agents should not be showing properties with damp or mould problems, but we know this happens more than it should. Now, things to consider when you are renting a property, some questions to ask. If you're worried about the condition of a property you're planning to rent or already renting, there's a brilliant guide on how to rent a safe home on the government website. And I put the website on the slide here, and it covers what to do if you're worried about your rented property, landlord's duties, and potential hazards. So you can download that guide if it's something you want to refer to. So some other things to consider when we're renting a property. So repairs and decoration. Other things to check in your tenancy agreement will include who is liable for minor repairs. In some cases, landlords are happy for tenants to carry out their own DIY work, but other landlords will prefer to carry out the work themselves or lean on the letting agent or like a property management company they employ to sort the repairs out for them. The tenancy agreement should also outline whether you are able to redecorate or not, and whether you require permission from your landlord for any work you undertake. It will also stipulate on things such as sticking up posters, putting up pictures, mirrors, and adding your own furniture and maintaining garden space. One of the really important things to find out about the local area and neighbours, it's all about location, 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 as the TV programme suggests. Whether you do your own research or you ask the landlord agent or agent, make sure you find out before you rent a property that it's well catered for in terms of parking if you need it, if it's in a parking permit area, do you need to pay for those, and what are the transport links like, as well as what's in the local area, like restaurants and transport and other local amenities. It's also worth finding out who's living around when you're looking at a property too. Perhaps visit at different times of the day to see if they are like noisy neighbours about or it's a noisy area. If the property is an apartment or a flat, is there a communal area like stairway, hall entrance, and those kind of areas? Make sure that they are well maintained and ask who is responsible for their upkeep. Some rentals enjoy communal gardens and shared laundry rooms, but you'll need reassurance that those facilities will be professionally maintained by an experienced block manager as to avoid problems and neighbourly disputes. If something goes wrong with the property, you'll need to know that what the landlord is responsible for and what you'll need to take care of. Is there an emergency contact number you can call in case of an emergency? Residential landlords should provide every tenant with a 24-hour maintenance service if needed. Now, check if there's any special clauses. So in order to minimise the potential for problems or disputes at a later date, ask whether the landlord has specific rules when it comes to keeping pets or smoking in the rental home. These are often disallowed due to potential risks involved and the greater chances of damage being caused. However, every landlord is different, and you may find that some accept pets, so there's no harm in asking them. And recent legislation is that they can't discriminate against if you've got pets. But there is always a way if they don't want pets in their home that they can, choose somebody else over you. They can't discriminate on those grounds, but there is loopholes around it if they don't want pets in the home. And lastly, check whether you can sublet the rental property in case of changes. So maybe you're seconded elsewhere with your job for a period of time, or you start a relationship and want to move them in. It should be very clear in the tenancy agreement whether you're allowed to sublet the rental property or not. And again, this is an individual decision by the landlord. If you sublet without permission from your landlord, the consequences can be severe, with sizable fines and potentially legal action brought against you. Now, let's look at fees. So since the 1st of June 2019, a number of significant changes have been made to the fees that letting agents and landlords can charge throughout a tenancy. So you can now no longer be charged with viewing fees, administration fees, or setting up the tenancy, and the landlord obtaining references. Letting agents used to make a lot of money off these initial fees. Also third-party fees such as credit checks on you and fees for leaving the property. However, you can still be charged for rent, bills, and security deposits, and you can still be charged for lost keys, late rental payments, and a change to the tenancy. However, if landlords want to charge you these default fees, they must include it in your tenancy agreement. So I think the point of all this is that you understand your tenancy agreement in full to get a good handle on what your rights and obligations are. It is essential to do this. The tenancy agreement includes so much important information, and it's a crucial part of any tenancy. So it's absolutely in your best interest to make sure you review it and understand what you're expected to do before signing. If you need or want to change your tenancy agreement for any reason later down the line, you must come to an agreement with your landlord on the terms of the changes. It's also important to be aware that it's illegal for your landlord to discriminate against you based on your gender, race, age, religion, or sexual orientation. Additionally, if you have a disability or are pregnant, law also exists to stop discrimination on these grounds. So a good example of this is if you're blind or partially sighted and you need a guide dog in your home, but a landlord doesn't allow pets, they must change those terms to allow guide dogs unless there is a very compelling reason not to do so. If you have any doubts about any terms of your tenancy agreement, you should ask your letting agent or landlord for further clarification. And if you want to seek any further help or legal advice, Citizen Advice is a brilliant organisation to help you with this. So once you've found your property and you've agreed the tenancy, the landlord or letting agent will want to confirm your identity, immigration status, credit history, and possible employment status to make sure you have. Make sure you have all your documents ready. They'll do a manual document-based check, do a check using online identity verification technology, or check via the Home Office online checking service. Some landlords might ask someone to guarantee your rent too. So, if you've not got a high income, they might want a guarantor. Now, just on screen, just going to run through quickly some of the things that you may have to consider. So every government how-to checklist, so they must be provided by law from a letting agent or a landlord. So you must have that guide given to you. You must have a gas safety certificate provided to you, and they have to have that checked by a gas safety engineer every 12 months. So any ovens, hobs, boilers, things like that. An energy performance and EPC certificate, so they must provide you with this. And it gives a performance rating of the property you're renting when you start renting that property. So that must be, in a rental property, it must be a grade. It can be between A and G, but it must have an energy performance of E or above to be a rental property. But from 2025, they've got to have a minimum of a C on them now. So that's going to be changing. Condition of electrics and alarms, so must have electrical wiring, sockets, fuse boxes. They must all be inspected and tested every 5 years, and that must be provided the proof that that's been done on rental, and relevant contact details as well. So you're entitled to have the name of your landlord and an address in either England or Wales where you can serve them notices in writing. Landlords are obliged to provide you with this information, and the rent is not lawfully due until they do so. So what are some of your responsibilities? So as well as your landlord having responsibilities, you do too. So basic ones, take care of the property. It's, it's first to take care of it in the absence of the landlord. This includes not causing any damage to the property whilst you're there, and report any issues promptly so that the landlord can fix them before they cause any severe damage. And it also means that if you've got any guests to your property, you're liable for that damage as well. Pay rent. You must pay the agreed amount of rent on time, even when you're in dispute with your landlord or waiting repairs. If your rent is more than 14 days late, you could be liable for a default fee, which is capped at about 3% above the Bank of England base rate. If you continually fall behind with your rent, the landlord may be able to take legal steps to evict you. Pay the bills and charges. It's your responsibility to pay all the other bills and charges outlined in your tenancy agreement, such as council tax, utility bills, TV licence, and failure to pay these may affect your credit rating. Linking in with before, taking care of the property, pay for damages, report and pay for any damage that's been caused by you, other tenants, or guests. If you've got any major problems, you must inform the landlord, but they may try to reclaim costs in that deposit you give initially. Check your sublet terms. We've already mentioned subletting. You must only sublet your property if the tenancy agreement states that you may do so. If you breach the tenancy agreement, your landlord has the right to take legal action against you. And it may sound obvious, but be considerate to neighbours. If you're not considerate to your neighbours, you could be evicted for antisocial behaviour. So it is important that you respect everybody within the area. And also one quick one, just remember to register to vote at your new address and make sure all your bills and accounts are at this address, as doing this will make sure your credit score is not affected. Just want to quickly, briefly go over tenants insurance. So just about landlords should insure the building, but it's your responsibility to insure your contents within that building. So there's two main types of tenants insurance. So there's tenants liability, or there's just plain bog standard contents insurance, which I have. Tenants liability covers accidental damage to your landlord's contents and items they provide for your use, like white goods, things like that. Whereas contents insurance covers your personal possessions in case of fire, theft, accidental damage, or other insured risks. On screen, I've put some comparison sites you can use to shop around for the best insurance products. You must shop around, get the best deal, and make sure it's fit for purpose and it covers all the items that are in your home and you've got the right amount of coverage for those items. Now, lastly, I just want to, there will be a time where you want to move out. If it isn't at the end of your fixed term, make sure you give your landlord the required notice under the tenancy agreement in writing, and make sure that your rent payments are up to date. Do not keep back rent because you think that it will be taken out of the deposits, as this could end up, you may end up paying a fee for that. Also, don't leave bills unpaid. This might have an impact on your references and credit rating, which could affect your ability to rent a property in the future, or even get a mortgage if you're doing that. It's best to do meter readings when you leave the property and take photos of meters so you don't pay more than you've used. Naturally, move all your possessions, clean the house, dispose of rubbish, and try to leave the property in the same condition that you found it in. Check this against your copy of the inventory and take photos that show how you've left the property. I recommend taking photos when you move in and taking photos when you move out. And remember to return all sets of keys that were provided. If you don't do that, the landlord may charge you for changing the locks. And it's wise to be present when the property is inspected to agree whether any of the tenancy deposits should be deducted to cover damage. If you do not agree with the proposed deductions, you are entitled to contact the relevant deposit protection scheme to challenge the decision and raise a case. And at this point, I just want to mention evictions too. So protection from eviction. So landlords must follow strict procedures if they want you to leave that home. They may be guilty of harassing or illegally evicting you if they do not follow the correct procedures. Landlords must provide you with the correct notice period, and they can only legally remove you from the home by obtaining a court order for possession and arranging for a warrant to be executed by court bailiffs. If you need more information about your rights, please take a look at the guide on the gov.uk website, understanding the possession action process. And that's a guide for people in England and Wales. Please check your local level if you're not in England or Wales. And I just want to mention that Shelter, the website Shelter, the charity Shelter, are absolutely brilliant with these sort of things about any kind of housing issues. So please have a look at their website. They have a lot of templates as well, letter templates, on what you may need to write some official. So that was a whistle-stop tour of renting a property, but there's a summary on screen of everything that we have gone through. So I'll quickly whiz through that. So to live in a property that's safe and in good state of repair, so these are your rights. You have to have your deposit returned at the end of the tenancy, to know the identity of your landlord, to live in the property undisturbed. This shouldn't be coming interrupting you. To see the property's energy performance certificate, because that'll help you budget and know whether, how your bills will be. To be protected from unfair rent and unfair eviction. You have the right to a written agreement if you have a fixed term tenancy of more than 3 years, and not to have to pay certain fees when setting up a new tenancy under the new Tenant Fees Act, and that was introduced in June 2019. I'll just pop on screen some of the help and support mechanisms that are in place. That's it for today's session. I'm happy to answer any questions. So Sarah, if you want to fire those away. But yeah, the help and support on the screen, again, citizens advice, really good place to go to. Shelter, it's not just about homelessness. Shelter, it's about any kind of housing issues, whether you're a renter, tenant, a landlord, a mortgage holder, and then the other resources on screen.
That's great. Thank you very much. So first question, and if anyone has any questions, do just drop them in the chat box or in the Q&A box. What is the typical process if there is an overabundance of pests? We have one person who has had issues with ants, spiders, beetles, and biting bugs, and these are coming from other flats and outside. Can someone cancel a lease because of this issue?
I can't advise whether you could cancel a lease or not, but the first thing is to report it to the landlord. I would put everything in writing to the landlord or to the letting agent. I would go on that shelter website that I've already mentioned, see if there's any letter templates for this, because if you follow a particular process, then you've backed it up. Because if it did escalate to the point where you wanted to, cut off your lease or you wanted to leave the property because of these issues, and this can go for all sorts of issues, you've got to make sure you followed the process, because they can go back and go, well, you didn't do this and you didn't do that. You have to be showing that you're doing something as well to try and combat the issue. So whether it's pests or it's damp and mold, that you've got provisions in place that you're helping that situation as well. But the first thing to do is report it, see what other kind of guidance you need, make sure that you're doing everything possible. And then I would get advice then if they're not responding to you and they're not doing anything about the issue, then I would get some advice from citizens advice, how you can escalate it, but make sure you follow the correct steps first.
That's great. And the next question that we've got is, does a landlord have to give a reason for an eviction?
I think there's no fault evictions now, or you can't be. So I'm not 100% on this. You would have to get some advice, because this goes into the realms of legalities and it's a legal process. You're going to have to get the right the right answers for that. I'm sorry, I can't answer it because it would deem that I'm giving advice there. You need to follow the correct procedures, and the landlord, if they want to evict you, like I said in the presentation just then, it's a really strict process. It can take months and even years to get somebody out of a property, and they have to have good reasons behind it. It is a legal and a court process. So they can't just kick you out of the house. If they want you out and they want to evict you, like I said, it's a lengthy process that they have to follow, and it's a lengthy and a costly process.
Lovely, thank you. And next question, can a landlord charge for DIY work that they have done?
It all depends on the work, doesn't it? If the damage was caused by you and it wasn't wear and tear, if it was natural wear and tear, then I would say they shouldn't be charging you for it, because it's natural. But if, a door was ripped off its hinges, or, a cupboard door had come off and things like that, they may charge you for that. But again, checking your tenancy agreement and speak with your landlord and make it clear what your responsibilities and what are their responsibilities. Like I said, it all depends on the type of DIY work that you're having done. For example, I'll give you an example. I live in a rental property and I want to freshen up my bathroom. There's nothing wrong with the bathroom. I want it just painted, and I'm going to foot the cost for that, because it's not natural kind of wear and tear. There's nothing wrong with it, but I want to freshen it up, so I'm going to foot the cost for that. I wouldn't expect my landlord to do that because it's something I'm choosing to do. So again, it all depends on the situation and what kind of repair it is.
Thank you, that's great. And just one more, as I can see the time has just about hit 1 o'clock. My landlord says I'm not allowed pets, but I thought landlords aren't allowed to discriminate against pet owners anymore. Do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, they aren't allowed to discriminate. So it either depends on whether you're in the property already, or if you're going for a property. So say there was a property for rent and there was 10 people wanting this property, and 2 of them had pets. The landlord's going to get around it by not choosing those 2 people. They're just going to choose one of the other 8 people, aren't they? So that's how they can get around it, but they can't say to your face, the reason you're not getting this property is because you've got pets. Now, if you decided to get a pet while you were in the property, I'm not sure how that would work, because it is quite a new legislation. It's something to have a conversation about. You might be able to come to some compromise with your landlord, but then what they might do is when your tenancy comes to an end, they might not renew your tenancy. And they don't have to give you a reason why they're not renewing your tenancy. That is their property. They can do what they want in that case. So say you only had a 6 month tenancy and then you got a pet within that, they might say, well, actually, I want my house back after the 6 months. So they may have to allow you to have the pet whilst you're in the property, but then they might not renew your tenancy. So it depends on the timelines with that.